They disrespected me at Christmas, then I sold the house they thought was theirs. True story. Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own home, invisible to the very people you love most, taken for granted until you were nothing more than a convenient fixture? Have you watched your entire world, built on love and sacrifice, slowly, deliberately, be dismantled by those who claim to care for you? I have. Oh, how I have. Have you ever watched the child you devoted your entire life to, the one you nurtured and sacrificed for, slowly, agonizingly, cast you aside for the person they married? Have you seen them become a stranger, their eyes glazed over with a loyalty that eclipses all memory of your love, all sense of filial duty? I have. Oh, how I have. It's a pain that gnaws at your very soul, a betrayal so profound it leaves you gasping for air in the quiet hours of the night. You question everything you've ever done, every choice you've ever made. You wonder where I went wrong, how I could have raised someone who would stand by, silent and complicit, as his own mother was publicly humiliated. But they didn't know, did they? They didn't know the silent strength that had been building within me, brick by agonizing brick, for years. They didn't know that I, the seemingly fragile old woman they had so carelessly dismissed, would ultimately be the one to write the final, unexpected chapter of their story. And let me tell you, dear friend, it was a chapter they never saw coming. Not in their wildest, most entitled dreams. The air that Christmas, just a few months ago, was thick with the cloying scent of pine and betrayal. It was my house, you see. The house my late husband, Arthur, and I had built together, brick by brick, memory by memory, over 40 beautiful years. I could still trace the faint outline of our handprints in the concrete of the porch, placed there on a whim when Cale was just a toddler, filled with the boundless energy of youth. This house was the heart of our family, the place where we'd celebrated countless Christmases, birthdays, anniversaries. The living room, with its grand fireplace that Arthur always insisted on keeping perfectly swept, had witnessed so much joy, so much laughter. The kitchen, with its sturdy oak cabinets that Xantha so despised, had been the crucible of countless family meals, recipes passed down through generations, each dish infused with love and tradition. But this year, it felt like a battlefield, and I, the hostess, was merely a casualty waiting to happen. Xantha, my daughter-in-law, my son Cale's wife, had been in charge of the menu, ostensibly, to lighten my load. A laughable pretense, considering she never lifted a finger unless it was to point. Her idea of helping was delegating, and her method of delegation was issuing commands. She prided herself on her modern flair, her sophisticated palate, a thinly veiled insult to my decades of traditional family recipes. She had even insisted on replacing my grandmother's antique lace tablecloth with a stark, minimalist gray runner, claiming it was more contemporary. Each change, no matter how small, felt like a deliberate erasure of my history, my presence. Dinner was served, and the atmosphere, already strained, tightened further. The chatter was forced, punctuated by Xantha's boisterous pronouncements about her culinary prowess. When it was my turn, Xantha, with a smirk that didn't quite reach her eyes, scooped a single, almost theatrical spoonful of mashed potatoes onto my plate. A sliver of turkey so thin you could practically see through it, a meager scrap of white meat from the bird I had spent hours brining and roasting. And a few token green beans, deliberately placed at the edge of the plate as if an afterthought. My plate, usually laden with the warmth and generosity of a family feast, looked barren, almost mocking. My stomach clenched, not from hunger, but from the icy grip of humiliation. I could feel the eyes of my distant cousins, who had traveled hours to be there, darting towards my plate, then to Xantha, then back to me, a silent question hanging in the air. She then proceeded to pile Cale's plate high, overflowing it, almost to the point of absurdity. And then her own. And her parents, who were visiting for the first time in years, looking on with an air of entitled amusement. They watched, their eyes darting between my meager portion and the mountains of food on everyone else's plates, a silent question hanging in the air. Xantha, oblivious or perhaps deliberately ignoring the discomfort she'd created, leaned in conspiratorially, her voice pitched just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, Elara," she purred, a false sweetness coating her words like sickly glaze, "you know how you always say you don't eat much these days. We wouldn't want to waste anything, would we? Especially with all the new, expensive things we'll be doing around here. The emphasis on new and expensive was like a sharp jab to my ribs. New, expensive things. That was her favorite phrase these days. She'd been dropping hints, then not so subtle demands, about renovating the house. Her renovations. Not ours. My house. She wanted to rip out the kitchen, too old-fashioned. Elara, really, who uses oak cabinets anymore? I remembered Arthur and I painstakingly selecting those very cabinets, dreaming of the meals we'd share. She wanted to tear down the wallpaper I had lovingly chosen with Arthur, a delicate floral pattern that spoke of warmth and history, so dated, darling, practically Victorian. She wanted to turn my cozy reading nook, nestled by the sun-drenched bay window where I read countless books with Cale when he was small, into a modern media lounge. Everything I held dear, everything that spoke of my life, my love, my memories, was a target for her modernization. It felt less like renovation and more like eradication. Then came the next blow. My contribution to the Christmas spread, as always, was my famous apple pie, a recipe handed down through generations, beloved by everyone, Cale especially. My grandmother had taught it to my mother, and my mother to me, a legacy of warmth and comfort. I'd spent hours baking it, the scent of cinnamon and baked apples filling the kitchen, a rare moment of peace amidst the rising tension. The flaky crust, the perfectly spiced apples, it was a piece of my soul. As dessert time approached, Xantha cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. Now, for dessert, she announced, her smile brittle, we have my stunning tiramisu. I spent hours perfecting this recipe, it's truly a labor of love. And then she paused, her gaze sweeping over the table, deliberately landing on my pie sitting modestly on the counter, its golden crust glowing. And Elara also made her traditional apple pie. It's very old-fashioned, isn't it, Elara? The way she said old-fashioned made it sound like a disease, a mark of shame, something to be pitted or ridiculed. She dismissed it with a wave of her hand, a dismissive flick of her wrist, steering everyone towards her tiramisu, which, I must admit, was perfectly fine, if not exactly a culinary masterpiece. But it wasn't the point. The point was the deliberate, public slight. The diminishing of my effort, my love, my place in this family. People hesitantly took small slices of her tiramisu, some even looking apologetically at me, their eyes flickering towards my untouched pie. But no one, not one person, dared to ask for a slice of my pie. Because Xantha had decreed it. And in her presence, her word was law. It was a silent boycott, orchestrated by her, enforced by Cale's acquiescence. My throat tightened. I swallowed, trying to dislodge the lump of hurt that had formed there, a painful knot of humiliation. I looked at Cale, my son, my only child. He sat across from me, his eyes fixed on his plate, meticulously cutting his tiramisu, as if the precise angle of his spoon was the most important thing in the world. He knew. He had to know what she was doing. He knew how much that pie meant to me, how much every tradition, every family gathering, meant to me. He knew how much I cherished my home, our home. He knew the history of that pie, the memories baked into its very essence. But he said nothing. Not a word. Not a glance of reassurance, not a subtle shake of the head, nothing. His silence was louder than any of Xantha's cutting remarks. It was a roar of indifference, of complicity. It was then, in that moment, that something inside me, something that had been stubbornly clinging to hope for years, finally snapped. The last thread of my enduring patience, my fierce, unconditional mother's love, frayed and broke. The final, brutal act came after dinner, when the coffee was poured, and the small talk had dwindled to an uncomfortable murmur. Xantha, emboldened by Cale's unwavering silence and the passive acceptance of the other guests, cleared her throat again, this time with a distinct air of authority, like a queen addressing her subjects. Now, she began, her voice crisp, cutting through the lingering tension, there's something important we need to discuss. Cale and I have been talking, and it's become clear that this house, wonderful as it is, needs significant upgrades. Major renovations, really, to bring it up to modern standards. We're talking a new kitchen, 2 new bathrooms, a complete overhaul of the living areas. It's going to be a substantial investment. She paused, her eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on me, a predatory gleam in them. And Alara, given that you live here with us, and you benefit directly from the comforts of this home, we really do need you to contribute. We've calculated that, to cover your share, we'll need at least $50,000. Her voice was devoid of any warmth, any empathy. It was a business proposition, delivered with the cold precision of a debt collector. $50,000. My jaw nearly dropped, held in place only by sheer force of will. I stared at her, then at Cale, whose gaze was now firmly fixed on the ornate pattern of the carpet, as if the threads held the answers to all his problems. He wouldn't meet my eyes. $50,000. For their renovations. In my house. The implication was clear. I was a burden, a financial drain, an outdated relic inhabiting a space they felt entitled to modernize with my money. My hands, resting on my lap, trembled slightly, the tremor traveling up my arms, shaking my very core. The sheer audacity, the public demand, the utter disrespect. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the power play, the complete erasure of my autonomy, my presence, my very being in my own home. My eyes burned, but I refused to let the tears fall. Not in front of them. Not in front of her. I would not give her the satisfaction. I looked at Cale again, pleading with my eyes for him to speak, to intervene, to defend me, his mother. He looked up briefly, his expression a mixture of discomfort and something else, resignation? Avoidance? A flicker of self-pity, perhaps? He opened his mouth, as if to speak, as if a flicker of his old self might emerge, and then Xantha placed a hand on his arm, a possessive, silencing gesture, her fingers digging lightly into his bicep. He closed his mouth. And the silence screamed. It was at that precise moment, watching my son shrink under his wife's manipulative gaze, that the last vestiges of my patience, my hope, my unconditional love for the son who had abandoned me, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. I felt utterly betrayed, discarded, like an old, worn-out piece of furniture. But I wasn't furniture. I was Alara. And they had no idea who Alara truly was. The decision, clear and sharp as glass, formed in my mind. And you think this was the first time? Oh, if only. If only that Christmas dinner had been an isolated incident, a momentary lapse in judgment, an unfortunate misunderstanding. No, dear friend, this was merely the crescendo, the final, deafening chord in a symphony of disrespect that had been playing for years. Years. It began subtly, as these things often do, like a slow drip, eroding the very foundation of what I thought was an unshakable bond with my son. I remember the laughter that used to echo in these halls, the warmth of a true family home. It felt like a distant dream now, replaced by the chilling coldness of their disregard. I remember when Cale first introduced me to Xantha. It was at a small brunch I hosted for him and a few of his colleagues. She was charming, wasn't she? Oh, she knew how to play the part. Her eyes sparkled with a manufactured sincerity, her smile seemed wide and genuine. She complimented my home, my cooking, my style. Alara, your home is just exquisite, so much character, she had gushed, her voice like honey. And this quiche, simply divine. You must teach me your secrets. She called me Mom almost immediately, a gesture that, at the time, warmed my heart, filling me with a foolish sense of hope for a new daughter. She seemed so loving, so attentive to Cale, constantly touching his arm, laughing at his jokes, looking at him with adoration. And I, foolishly, thought my son had found a truly good woman. He was so happy, so utterly smitten, his eyes practically glowing whenever she was near. And what mother doesn't want to see her child happy? So I welcomed her with open arms, with an open heart, and, as it turned out, with an open home. The shift began after the wedding, a beautiful affair that I, of course, paid for, or a significant portion of, anyway. I wanted them to have the perfect day, and Arthur had left me well provided for. I shelled out for the venue, the catering, Xantha's elaborate gown. I remembered her telling me, with a sweet smile, "Oh, Elara, you're just too generous. We'll make it up to you someday." That day, I now realized, would never come. Xantha started spending more and more time at the house, then eventually moved in, as Kale said it would save them money while they saved up for their own place. A place that, clearly, never materialized, the promise fading with each passing month. She started making little suggestions. "Oh, Elara, perhaps we could move this vase? It doesn't quite fit the aesthetic." Or, "Have you ever thought about painting this room a lighter color? It's a bit dark." Harmless, at first, or so I told myself, trying to be accommodating. Just a young woman wanting to put her stamp on a shared space. But the suggestions soon turned into directives, delivered with an air of absolute certainty. My beautiful ceramic vase, a wedding gift from Arthur's aunt, would be gone, replaced by something sleek and modern that I hated, a cold, geometric sculpture. My warm, inviting living room would be painted a cold, clinical gray, making it feel less like a home and more like a minimalist art gallery. My beautiful, antique Persian rug, a gift from Arthur on our 20th anniversary, a riot of deep reds and blues that spoke of far-off lands, suddenly found itself rolled up in the attic, deemed too busy for the new, minimalist decor. Each piece of her modernization felt like a chisel chipping away at my identity. Then came the maid phase, as I privately called it, a bitter humor born of my increasing resentment. Xantha never worked. She claimed she was pursuing her passion for online content creation, which mostly involved her scrolling through social media on the couch, surrounded by discarded snack wrappers and empty coffee cups. She would spend hours filming herself applying makeup, or reviewing expensive designer bags Kale had bought her. Kale, bless his naive heart, supported her, saying she was building her brand. So, naturally, the household chores fell to me. I'd wake up early, prepare breakfast, then cook dinner every night, not just for myself and Kale, but for Xantha too, always catering to her specific, often finicky, preferences. And then, once dinner was over, Xantha would declare herself exhausted from her creative endeavors and retreat to her room, leaving me to clear the table, wash the dishes, and clean the kitchen. Kale would sometimes offer to help, seeing the weary slump of my shoulders, but Xantha would immediately interject, "Oh, Kale, darling, you've had such a long day at work. Elara doesn't mind, do you, Elara? You're so good at it." And I, wanting to keep the peace, wanting to believe that this was just a temporary phase, a passing eccentricity, would smile weakly and say, "No, dear, it's quite all right." It was never quite all right. Each dish I washed, each floor I swept, felt like another chip at my dignity, another layer of self-respect peeled away. I felt my hands, once soft from a lifetime of hobbies and gentle tasks, becoming raw and red from the constant scrubbing. Holidays became a particular source of anguish. I loved hosting, always had. My Christmas dinners were legendary, my Thanksgiving spreads a feast for the eyes and the stomach, prepared with meticulous care and joyous anticipation. But Xantha began to take over, dictating the menu, assigning tasks, making me feel like a caterer in my own home. "Elara, you can handle the potatoes, can't you? And don't forget the gravy, you're so good at gravy." It was always the most labor-intensive, least glamorous tasks, the ones that kept me in the kitchen while she entertained. And she would take all the credit, basking in the glow of compliments she hadn't earned. My Christmas dinner was a huge success, wasn't it? She declared to guests, her smile wide and self-satisfied, as if I hadn't spent 3 days preparing everything, organizing every detail, baking every cookie. I watched as my friends, my extended family, started to see me less as the matriarch and more as the silent, subservient helper, a background fixture. Their glances, once full of admiration, now held pity. And Kale? Oh, my sweet Kale. He was once such a thoughtful, attentive son. He used to call me every day, just to chat, to tell me about his day, to listen to mine. He used to bring me flowers, take me out for lunch to that little cafe downtown we both loved, listen to my stories about Arthur, a bond of shared grief and cherished memories. But after Xantha, he started to drift. He'd become distant, his calls fewer and farther between, always hurried, always ending abruptly. When I tried to talk to him, to express my hurt, my confusion, the growing unease in my heart, he'd dismiss my feelings with a weary sigh. "Oh, Mom, you're overreacting. That's just Xanda's way. She means well." Or, "You know how sensitive you are, Mom. She didn't mean anything by it." He'd defend her, always, even when her actions were undeniably cruel, cutting to the bone. He'd make excuses, rationalize her behavior, minimize my pain, as if my feelings were an inconvenience, an obstacle to his peaceful life. He became a puppet, dancing to Xanda's tune, his strings pulled tighter and tighter with each passing year. I saw the love in his eyes for her, and it eclipsed, it utterly overshadowed, any care he had left for me. It was a slow, agonizing process of watching my son disappear behind the shadow of his wife, a ghost of his former self. There were so many moments. The time Xanda accidentally spilled an entire glass of red wine on my favorite armchair, the one Arthur used to sit in, his scent still faintly clinging to the worn velvet. She then insisted, with a shrug, that it was time for a new couch anyway. "Elara, that old thing is practically disintegrating." She dismissed anything old as inherently bad, anything traditional as worthy of contempt. The way she'd openly mock my old-fashioned clothes, my boring taste in music, my antiquated views on, well, everything. She made me feel irrelevant, anachronistic, a relic from a bygone era that needed to be swept aside, replaced by something shiny and new. I used to confront Kale, my voice shaking with tears, the hurt raw in my throat. "Kale, why does she treat me like this? Why do you let her? Don't you see what she's doing?" He would sigh, run a hand through his hair, and say, "Mom, please. Can't we just have peace? You two just need to get along." Get along? How could I get along with someone who systematically dismantled my life, piece by piece, right in front of my son's passive gaze? It was like asking me to make peace with a thief who was robbing me blind. I remember a particularly painful Thanksgiving, just 2 years ago. I had prepared the entire meal, as usual, rising before dawn to start the turkey, peeling mountains of potatoes, stirring the cranberry sauce. Xanda had decided to grace us with her presence in the kitchen for a grand total of 15 minutes, during which she managed to criticize my stuffing recipe, "Too heavy, Elara, and where's the kale?" complain about the oven temperature, and then disappear back to her phone, claiming she had urgent calls to make for her brand. When the family arrived, the house filled with the aroma of my cooking, she announced, with a dazzling, proprietorial smile, "Dinner is served." I worked so hard on this feast. Kale, instead of correcting her, merely smiled and nodded, his gaze fixed on her. My heart ached, a physical pain in my chest. It wasn't just the credit she stole, it was the blatant disregard for my effort, my very existence. It was as if I was invisible, a ghost haunting my own home, my toil erased, my love unacknowledged. My friends would notice. "Are you all right, Elara? You seem quiet, almost withdrawn." And I'd make excuses, "Oh, just tired, dear, the holidays always wear me out." I was tired. Exhausted from fighting a battle no one else seemed to see, a battle against an invisible enemy who had taken over my son's mind and my own home. I started to withdraw, spending more time in my room, finding solace in my books, in the quiet company of Arthur's old photographs, their faded smiles a comforting balm to my wounded spirit. The house, once a hub of laughter and love, became a cage. And my son, my only son, had become the keeper of that cage, his complicity turning the key. The shame, the loneliness, the deep, abiding hurt. It was a suffocating blanket, smothering the vibrant woman I once was. I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller, less significant, until I was almost nothing. And they, Xanda and Kale, seemed perfectly content with that. They thrived on my diminishment. They reveled in their newfound dominance. They thought they had won. But they didn't know about the final secret my late husband, Arthur, left me. Oh, they had no idea. Arthur, bless his foresightful soul, had always been a meticulous man. He thought of everything. He planned for every eventuality, every twist and turn life might take. Even for a future where his beloved Alara might need protecting, might need a shield against unforeseen challenges. When he passed, 7 years ago, the grief was immense, a gaping hole in my life that I thought would never heal. But his careful planning had made the transition as smooth as possible. He left me financially secure, with investments and annuities, ensuring I would never want for anything. And, crucially, he left me this house. This house, he had told me once, long ago, his hand gently squeezing mine as we sat on the porch swing, is your sanctuary, Alara. It's where our life unfolded, where our memories are etched into every wall. It will always be yours. And he made sure of it. After his passing, when the will was read, it was clear. The house, our beautiful family home, was solely, unequivocally, in my name. Not in Cale's name, not jointly, but mine alone. It was a provision Arthur had added after Cale married Xantha, though he never explicitly said why, merely mentioning it was a practical adjustment for future security. He simply said, "It's for your security, my love. For your peace of mind." He must have seen something, felt something, some inkling of Xantha's true nature, even then. He trusted his instincts, and he trusted me to know when, or if, to use this ultimate power. It was my secret trump card, tucked away in a safe deposit box, a quiet, powerful testament to his enduring love and protection, a whispered promise from beyond the grave. For years, I had kept it that way. A secret. A comfort. A just-in-case measure, a silent guardian. I had hoped I would never have to use it. I had hoped Cale would never allow it to come to that. I had hoped his love for me, his mother, would be enough to keep the peace, to keep me safe in my own home. But that Christmas, as Xantha's cruel words echoed in the silence of Cale's betrayal, something shifted inside me. The hope that had sustained me for years, the belief that Cale would eventually see the light, would eventually choose his mother, shattered into jagged shards. It wasn't just the disrespect, it was the public humiliation, the aggressive demand for money, the absolute assumption of their entitlement to my home, my sanctuary. It was Cale's utter silence, his cowardly complicity. It was clear then, my son had chosen his wife. He had chosen her comfort, her demands, her manipulation, over my dignity, my well-being, my very existence. And in that moment, the raw, aching pain of betrayal transformed into a cold, hard resolve, sharp and unyielding as steel. I looked at Xantha, her face smug, victorious, a triumphant glint in her eyes. I looked at Cale, his face averted, burdened by a cowardice that twisted my stomach, a knot of disappointment and anger forming within me. And I knew. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my voice, my power. It was about teaching them a lesson they desperately needed to learn, a lesson about gratitude, respect, and the true cost of taking someone for granted. They had pushed me to the edge, and now, I would push back. That night, after everyone had left and the house was finally quiet, save for the frantic hum of my thoughts, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the silent witnesses to decades of my life. I thought of Arthur, his gentle smile, his protective nature, his unwavering love. I thought of the laughter that once filled these rooms, the warmth that permeated every corner, the echoes of Cale's childhood giggles. And then I thought of the coldness, the mockery, the endless belittling I had endured, the quiet despair that had become my constant companion. The decision, though painful, was clear. I would not be a doormat in my own home. I would not be a charity case in my own life. I would not be silenced. My spirit, once so bruised, began to stir, a quiet fire igniting within. The very next morning, the day after Christmas, while Cale and Xantha were still asleep, blissfully unaware of the seismic shift that had occurred within me, I made the call. I called Arthur's old lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a kind, elderly gentleman who had handled all our family affairs for decades, a man of quiet integrity. He was surprised to hear from me so early, especially the day after Christmas. "Alara, dear, is everything all right?" he asked, his voice laced with concern, recognizing the unusual hour of my call. "No, Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady, though my heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of newfound resolve. "Nothing is all right. I need to activate the clause in Arthur's will. The one regarding the house. I need to sell it." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, a pause filled with the weight of my words. Then, "Are you absolutely certain, Elara? This is a significant step. It's irreversible." "I am," I replied, my resolve hardening with each word, like molten steel cooling into an unbreakable form. "More certain than I have ever been about anything in my entire life. They have pushed me too far. It's time they learned the true meaning of consequences." Mr. Henderson, knowing Arthur and me as well as he did, didn't argue. He understood the silent plea in my voice, the years of unspoken pain. He simply said, "Very well, Elara. I'll start the paperwork immediately. It will be a quick process, as the ownership is entirely clear. We'll need to find a realtor, of course, but I have a few trusted contacts. And we'll need to serve them with an eviction notice, giving them a reasonable timeframe to find new accommodation. 60 days, typically. An eviction notice." The words felt harsh, alien to my nature, so contrary to the nurturing, welcoming woman I had always been. But then I remembered Xanda's sneer, Cale's silence, the audacious demand for $50,000, the endless parade of slights. And the harshness faded, replaced by a quiet, fierce sense of justice. It was time. It was truly time. The house, my sanctuary, would no longer be a cage. It would be my liberation. And their reckoning. The next few weeks were a blur of activity, managed with the utmost discretion. Mr. Henderson introduced me to a diligent realtor, a young woman named Sarah, who handled everything with efficiency and empathy. We took photos of the house when Xanda and Cale were out, arranged for appraisals when they were at work. It felt clandestine, almost like a spy novel, but necessary. The market was hot, and the house, being in such a desirable neighborhood, garnered immediate interest. The sheer size and classic charm of it were a rare find. We had even received a strong offer just the week before, well above the asking price, from a lovely young couple starting their own family. All that was left was to finalize the paperwork and, of course, inform the current occupants. The anticipation was a tight knot in my stomach, a mixture of dread and exhilarating relief. And then, the day came. Oh, the day everything would be laid bare. It wasn't a dramatic family dinner, no. I had learned from Xanda's theatrics. My reveal would be quiet, precise, and utterly devastating. It was a Tuesday morning, a dreary, gray day in January, the sky mirroring the mood I intended to cast over them. The festive decorations were long gone, packed away by me, of course, while Xanda claimed she was too busy with her online empire. Xanda was working in her room, Cale was at work, and I had a meeting scheduled with Sarah, the real estate agent, and Mr. Henderson right there in my living room. I had arranged for Xanda to be present, sending a polite but firm text message to her the night before. I had sent a separate text to Cale, asking him to come home early from work for an important family discussion, a premonition of unease clinging to his reply. He texted back, "Everything okay, Mom? Sounds serious." I simply replied, "It will be." A small, secret smile touched my lips. Around 3 p.m., Xanda sauntered into the living room, dressed in her usual designer loungewear, a bored expression on her face. She held her phone in one hand, scrolling idly. "What's all this, Elara?" she asked, gesturing vaguely at Sarah's folder and Mr. Henderson's briefcase on the coffee table. Her tone was dismissive, as if my very presence, let alone a formal meeting, was an inconvenience she had to tolerate. "Are you finally getting a will written?" "About time. We should probably review it to ensure everything is in order for Cale." The sheer arrogance of her assumption, that my will was for their benefit, was breathtaking. Just then, Cale walked in, looking tired from his day, his shoulders slumped. He saw Mr. Henderson and his eyebrows furrowed, a flicker of genuine concern now in his eyes. "Mr. Henderson? What's going on?" he asked, his voice tinged with apprehension. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. My voice, though quiet, was firm, clear, and steady, carrying the weight of years of silent suffering and the force of my newfound resolve. Please, sit down, both of you. They did, Xantha with an impatient huff, crossing her arms, Cale with a growing sense of unease, his gaze fixed on me, searching for answers. I've called you here today, I began, my gaze sweeping over their faces, allowing myself a moment to savor the stillness, the calm before the storm, because there's a matter of great importance regarding this house. Xantha smirked, a knowing, condescending look. Oh, finally, Elara, are you going to sign it over to us? About time. We've been waiting to start those renovations. You know, to really make it ours. The sheer audacity of her statement, the casual assumption of ownership, ignited a cold fury within me. I allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to touch my lips. No, Xantha. Quite the opposite, actually. Her smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. Cale looked from me to Xantha, then back to me, his confusion deepening, a faint blush rising on his cheeks. As you both know, I continued, my voice gaining a quiet power, each word deliberate, this house was Arthur's and my home. And upon Arthur's passing, full legal ownership of this property, without any encumbrances or co-ownership clauses, passed entirely to me. I glanced at Mr. Henderson, who nodded solemnly, his expression grave. Arthur made sure of it. It was a decision he made to ensure my security, my peace of mind, for the rest of my life. Xantha scoffed, a short, disbelieving sound. Yes, we know, Elara. You live here. We live here. It's a family home. What's your point? Are you finally getting around to putting our names on the deed? My point, Xantha, I said, my voice unwavering, my gaze fixed firmly on her, is that this house, my house, is no longer yours to claim. Not for renovations, not for anything. I paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing their full impact to sink in. I have decided to sell it. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with shock. Xantha's face, usually composed in an expression of haughty disdain, went slack with disbelief. Her eyes widened, her mouth slightly agape, a faint gasp escaping her lips. Cale, who had been leaning forward, suddenly sat bolt upright, as if electrocuted, his face paling to an ashen gray. His breath hitched. Sell it? Xantha finally sputtered, her voice rising in pitch, cracking with fury and disbelief. You can't sell it. This is our home. Cale's home. Where will we live? Her carefully constructed facade was crumbling rapidly. It was Cale's home, I corrected, my gaze fixed firmly on him, my voice holding a profound sadness, when he respected the person who owned it. When he respected his mother. But clearly, those days are long past. He chose to stand by and watch me be humiliated, to let you dismantle my life, piece by piece. I looked at Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson, if you please. He calmly opened his folder and pulled out a document, his movements slow and deliberate. As per Mrs. Elara Thompson's instructions, and in accordance with her sole legal ownership of this property, we have secured a buyer. The sale is set to close in approximately 6 weeks. This document, he handed a legal-looking paper to Xantha, then one to Cale, his voice professional, devoid of emotion, is a formal eviction notice. It grants you both 60 days from today to vacate the premises. Xantha snatched the paper, her eyes scanning it frantically, her elegant fingers trembling. Eviction notice, she shrieked, her voice now a full-blown scream, raw with panic and outrage. This is insane. You can't do this, Elara. We live here. Where are we supposed to go? We have no savings. Cale, do something. That, Xantha, I said, my voice unwavering, steady as a rock, is no longer my concern. Just as my comfort, my feelings, and my contributions were never your concern. You made it very clear at Christmas that I was a financial drain, that my presence here was merely for your convenience, and that my home was simply a canvas for your modern tastes. You demanded $50,000 for your renovations in my house. You belittled my traditions, my efforts, and my very being. And Cale, my eyes finally met my son's, and for the first time in years, I saw true shock, horror, and a dawning, crushing regret etched on his face, a raw vulnerability that almost softened my resolve. Cale stood by and let you do it. He chose to be silent. He chose you over me, his own mother, in my own home. Cale finally found his voice, a strangled whisper, barely audible. Mom, you can't be serious. Where will we go? We don't have anywhere else. This is all we have. His eyes were wide, pleading, filled with a desperate terror. Perhaps, I replied, a profound sadness in my voice, a weary sigh escaping my lips. You should have thought about that before you treated me like a servant, a burden, a ghost in my own house. You took my presence for granted, my generosity for weakness. You assumed this house was your inheritance, your right, simply because you married into this family and happened to be my son. But it was never yours. It was always mine. And now, it is mine to sell. And I have. Xantha, wild-eyed, pointed a trembling finger at me, her face contorted with rage. You manipulative old witch. You planned this. You've been hiding this from us. You're evil. Hiding? I asked, raising an eyebrow, a cold, knowing glint in my eyes. Or simply exercising my rights as the sole legal owner, a fact that was clearly stated in Arthur's will, which you both received copies of? Perhaps you should have read it more carefully, Xantha. Or perhaps you were too busy planning your next grand modernization project with money you didn't have, in a house that wasn't yours. The silence was once again thick, punctuated by the ragged breaths of Cale and Xantha. The look on Cale's face was one of absolute devastation. The regret was palpable, a bitter pill he was finally forced to swallow, its acrid taste surely filling his mouth. He looked at Xantha, then at me, then back at the eviction notice in his hand, and the realization of the magnitude of his inaction, his complicity, seemed to physically hit him, leaving him breathless. He had chosen his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity, and now, he stood to lose everything. They both did. So where is my daughter-in-law who called me the maid now, you ask? Oh, Xantha and Cale found themselves in quite the predicament. With only 60 days to vacate, and no savings to speak of, because, as you can imagine, Xantha's online content creation was hardly a lucrative career, primarily funded by Cale's salary and my own hidden generosity, and Cale's salary, while decent, was mostly spent on Xantha's lavish tastes and their supposed future renovations. They were utterly unprepared. They scrambled, frantic and desperate, their comfortable world shattered. They tried to reason with me, of course. Xantha called repeatedly, her voice no longer sugary but shrill with panic and thinly veiled threats. Ilara, please. You can't do this to us. We'll be homeless. Cale is your son. Think of your grandchild. A grandchild, I might add, that she had never bothered to consider before. I simply told her, calmly, that the decision was final, the paperwork was done, and the house was under contract. Cale called too, his voice broken, full of apologies and pleas, sounding like the terrified little boy he once was. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Please, don't do this. Give us another chance. I listened, my heart aching for the son he used to be, for the boy who would bring me dandelions and call them flowers, but also firm in my resolve. You had years of chances, Cale, I told him, my voice steady, though my hand trembled slightly on the phone. Years of opportunities to stand up for me, to speak out against her cruelty. And you chose to be silent. You chose her. Now, you must live with the consequences of that choice. I hung up the phone. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, a necessary amputation of a diseased limb, but it was necessary. For both of us. For my healing, and for his awakening. They ended up having to move into a tiny, cramped apartment on the other side of town, far from the affluent neighborhood they had so comfortably inhabited. Xantha, who thrived on appearances and social status, on flaunting her perceived wealth, was utterly mortified. Her online content creation became even less successful, as she could no longer pretend to live a glamorous, aspirational life in a grand house she didn't own. The illusion was shattered. She blamed Cale constantly, their arguments echoing through the thin walls of their new, meager dwelling, their once glamorous life now a cheap imitation. Their marriage, built on Xantha's entitlement and Cale's silent compliance, crumbled under the weight of financial stress and shattered expectations. I heard through the grapevine, from a mutual friend, that she eventually left him, unable to tolerate the poor life he had supposedly subjected her to, always blaming him for their downfall. As for Cale, he truly hit rock bottom. He had lost his wife, his home, and, for a time, his mother. He had to pick up extra shifts at work, struggling to pay for his small apartment and his mounting debts. The lesson, for him, was brutal but undeniable: inaction, and the failure to protect those you love, has profound consequences. He had taken everything for granted, believing that my love, and my home, were an endless, unconditional resource that he could exploit without consequence. He learned, the hard way, that even the most patient person has a breaking point, a limit beyond which they will not be pushed. He had to rebuild his life, piece by painful piece, without the comfort of my home or his wife's superficial adoration. Me? Well, I sold the house. It was a bittersweet moment, watching the new owners, a lovely young couple with bright, hopeful eyes, move in, full of dreams and plans for their future, just as Arthur and I once had been. But it was also incredibly liberating. I used a portion of the proceeds to buy myself a beautiful, smaller cottage, just outside of town, with a lovely garden bursting with roses and plenty of sunshine streaming through its large windows. It's truly mine, a sanctuary where I can finally find peace, where every object, every corner, speaks of my choice, my freedom. I've reconnected with old friends, started volunteering at the local library, immersing myself in stories that aren't my own for a change. I've taken up painting again, a hobby I loved but had abandoned for years. And for the first time in years, I feel like myself again. I feel empowered. I feel free. Cale eventually came to me, months later, truly remorseful, no longer the puppet. He had lost everything, but he had, perhaps, found himself. He recognized his mistakes, his cowardice, his profound failure as a son. He didn't ask for the house back, or for money. He simply sat and listened as I spoke, truly listened, the tears in his eyes genuine. He confessed his fear of Xantha, his desire for peace at any cost, his blindness to my suffering. It's a long road to rebuilding trust, but we're taking small steps. I told him I needed time, and that he needed to truly understand the depth of his actions, to atone for them not with words, but with consistent, respectful behavior. He understands now. The true cost of their ingratitude wasn't just a house, it was the shattering of a family, the loss of trust, and the painful realization that you can only push someone so far before they push back, harder than you could ever imagine. The lesson I learned, and the lesson I hope to share with all of you, is this: never, ever test anyone's patience to its limits. Especially not the quiet ones, the ones you think you can walk all over. Because those gentle souls, the ones who seem to endure endless disrespect, often hold the most potent cards. And when they finally decide to play them, the game changes entirely. They will reclaim their power, their dignity, and their peace, leaving those who wronged them to face the true, devastating cost of their ingratitude. Are there any other mothers out there who have forgotten themselves for the sake of their children's happiness, only to be discarded and taken for granted? Have you ever felt that agonizing pinch of betrayal from your own flesh and blood, or from an in-law who thought they could walk all over you? You are not alone. My channel has many similar stories of life lessons, of resilience, and of finding your strength when you thought you had none left. If my story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to my channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss another story of truth and triumph. And please, share your own troubles, your thoughts, your experiences in the comments below. Let's build a community where we can share our stories, support each other, and learn from life's hardest lessons together. Thank you for listening.